I'm Vincent Dufort, and if you're here for the first time, welcome. This is a free monthly conversation, and I say not for people who need it, but for people who want it. An invitation to be curious, and this is an Advancing Simplicity production. Tonight, I've been thinking about a question that lives underneath almost everything I do. How do we know what we know? I learn by observing, by doing, and by teaching. When I show up with curiosity, I'm bound to learn, and often I'm surprised by what I discover. I have learned that if I suspend my judgment for a minute and open my mind to curiosity, I learn things that I never could have imagined. Yes, I know things through reading and listening to experts, through studies and evidence in peer-reviewed journals that most of us haven't read since we were in school, if ever. But I find having these conversations with people I meet on the street or people I meet in the hall somewhere, invite onto this show, that's where a lot of learning happens as well. Most of the time, those two kinds of learning, those two kinds of knowing don't talk to each other very well. So I call it maybe the book learning, the ivory tower learning, and the hands-on in the streets knowledge. And tonight's guest has spent her entire career building the bridge between what I call the ivory tower and the practice. And you're going to let us help us walk across it. Quick housekeeping. We are recording tonight. The video will be on our YouTube channel and website within a few days. Drop your questions in the chat as we go. Rebecca will be, she is watching and she'll be paying attention to what goes on in the conversation so I can, in the chat, so I can just continue my conversation with Ann. And you can say hello in the chat if you're new. Love knowing who's in the room. Now, tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is a massage therapist who was curious to know more and went on to earn her doctorate in public health, whatever that means. She understands the research world and the treatment room with equal fluency, and she has spent her career asking the question most curious practitioners quietly wonder. What does the science actually say, and why doesn't it always look like what we do every day? I pulled this off of some of the websites that talked about you, Ann. Interest span communication, cultural humility. That's an interesting one, cultural humility, stress management, integrative medicine, qualitative mixed research methods, evidence-based medicine. And something that was kind of pulled off of one of those sites was to bring the patient and other stakeholders' perspectives to research and programs. And Ann Blair Kennedy, welcome to the Touchpoint.
Thank you. It's very great to be here.
I want to start somewhere a little unusual. Some of my favorite questions are the ones that sound simple but go deep, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I love asking that question. So here's mine for you. What were you noticing as a practitioner, because you were a practitioner before you became a researcher? What were you noticing as a practitioner? What questions were nagging at you that kept you up at night that eventually drove you to dive deep into the research world? What was the itch that practice alone couldn't scratch?
That is a great question. And I do have an answer right away because it was something that made me mad. I got really interested in research and I started trying to figure out how I could use it in practice because I wanted to really make sure that my practice was evidence-based and evidence-informed. And how can I really do that with my clientele and patients if I don't have a framework? And I wasn't really sure how to do it, but I started reading research. And I started getting madder and madder and madder for around two different topics. One, so much of the research at the time, so this was back in probably the early 2000s, it was before 2010 when I started reading all of this research, and I was looking at it going, why is all this research talking about anxiety and depression when that's out of our scope of practice in many states, in the US at least? It's not, we're not supposed to be therapists in any way, right? So, but why are all these outcomes getting measured in around anxiety and depression when we're not supposed to be doing that? But how does that work? And I just was really confused. But then in the other research I was reading around things like how to treat osteoarthritis of the knee, I would read these things, and so much of the research were these very strict protocols. Like, that's not what we do. It made me so mad. It's like all of this research is out there, and it's not exactly how I work. And so I didn't know how to apply anything. Like, how do I actually do this with my patients? And then I started to notice that so much of this research didn't include massage therapists at all. And it made me mad. I was like, well, dang it, I want this fixed. And if I want other people like me to be able to apply and use evidence in practice, then I'm just going to go fix it. Not that I've done that. I will not make any mention that I've done that at all. But I thought if I want more massage research to be focusing around what we actually do in practice and make it meaningful for people like me, then somebody has to go do it. And why can't I? So on the day my baby started kindergarten and my oldest started second grade, I started 19th grade and went back and got my DRPH in 3.5 years. And it's been fantastic ever since.
That's insane to get
That's
that
what
in
happens when
3.5
you're
years.
40.
Yep.
But that's what you do when you're 40 and you have children at home. You just go right through and get it done.
Yep. Yep. No hesitation. No second guessing.
Yeah.
Just go right through it.
Yes.
Did you have some people who were inspiring you, who were encouraging you at the time as well to
Absolutely. I remember speaking with Nikki Monk some as well, who is still a very dear friend and colleague and research partner, and have done several projects with her. And also, I was really Ruth Warner really helped push me as well. So at the time when I was thinking about it, just before that, I was doing some volunteer work with the Massage Therapy Foundation. And then the year I started my doctoral program, I was also on the board of trustees for the Massage Therapy Foundation. So I was deeply embedded with that work for the whole time I was in school as well. So that would also then lead to Geraldine Cameron, who was president at the time, who was also on my dissertation committee. So I can't not talk about her. Also very much an inspiration and a dear friend.
That's important, I think, to remember the people who pushed us into the place that we didn't think we would ever go. No, I went a little bit backwards, but all along there was someone or people who said, you can do this, you need to do this, you should do this kind of. I don't like that, but I paid attention because it made sense to me. I thought I was done with my undergrad, and my boss at the time said, you don't want to stay as an undergrad, you have to keep going and get at least a master's. And when I was doing a master's, I decided I would do a PhD. Why not? I'm here anyway. And there's interesting stuff going on, and maybe make an impact somehow.
We have a visitor.
Oh, nice.
Adidas has joined us. So
okay, good. Does Adidas have anything to say?
She likes massage therapy just as much as everybody else listening.
Okay.
She wants all the pets.
Oh, fun. So I'm not really changing tact a little bit here, but kind of a little bit. When I read about you, I made a parallel between the work you're doing and the stuff that people like Brene Brown are doing. I'm using that name because I think a lot of people know about Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And she is essentially saying that the experience that people have is the data. And I know that you talk about the patient experience as being part of the what drives you. Am I wrong in that in making that parallel?
You
That
are absolutely correct. And you have just mentioned one of the people that I want to have a dinner party with. You know, when you have to answer that question as an icebreaker,
yeah,
like who would you want to have dinner with? It's her.
yeah,
I have love her podcasts. I love her books. And what for other people who might not know, in massage land, I'm often known simply as ABK,
yes.
just by my initials. And she now has the ABK edit, which made me tear up when I first heard it because
Yeah.
it's awkward, brave, and kind. And that
Okay.
just, since you brought her up, it just makes me very excited. So,
Um,
yes, I think it is vitally important to have whoever is impacted by the research to be part of the research team,
mm,
whatever that is. So, if it is a patient with that condition, they should help design the research.
mhm,
If it is massage research, please have massage therapists included. If you're going to do something to a workflow in a hospital and it's nurses who have to implement it, you better have a nurse on your team who's helping design it to figure out how to talk to other nurses about how they're going to implement a workflow change. Because me as a researcher who's not a nurse, I don't know what that's going to do to them in their job. So it's if you want the research to be most impactful, you better have the people who are included in it help
mm.
design it and implement it.
And give credibility to the work you're doing, because one of the things I think, going back to that retower question, is if you come from without including these people, you think you know what you're saying, but it might not be applicable in reality. The place that catches me a lot is looking at health data, which is what in the VA we use a lot of intervention data, like health intervention data, visit data, and we make conclusions based on what is in the record. And I'm always questioning, is that really true? Because we don't know the story. Now, if someone shows up as an alcoholic, and I meet them in person and they say, I quit drinking 20 years ago, but they're still considered an alcoholic in the data, I'm leery to jump to conclusions based on what I see in the data. So that's my approach on working with the VA data, is to really question what you see in there, knowing, because I do a lot of work with veterans, I do a lot of work with the VA one-on-one, and I understand them a little bit. I'm not a veteran myself, but I do understand them a little bit, and I know that what shows up in the data doesn't always parallel um, what the real life experience is.
100%. And that's a lot of what I do in my day-to-day work is the bringing in. So what we have at the University of South Carolina, where I'm a professor, we have our patient engagement studio, and I'm the director. And we've been around for 10 years. And I actually started working with them when I was a postdoc. And then 2 years after it started, I was the director. And I have an amazing team that I work with. And our whole purpose is to bring those patients and other collaborators, stakeholders into that research process with other researchers. So I do a lot of communication with people who do not have a science background and then researchers. And every different field of research has its own language. And this is where we talk about the work that we do in our studio. We are basically interpreters, and we are the ones who build this bridge between patients and researchers to come together to do these things together. So we're helping to manage miscommunications between the two, making sure that research is applicable to both groups, and just really trying to facilitate those conversations between these different individuals. And it has just been such a joy to have my research changed by the people it's going to impact. And these we call them patient experts because they're experts at being patients and they are compensated for their work. We do pay them. And they have changed me as a researcher to think first about the patient who is going to be impacted by that research. And it's so much fun to do this work. And I just love my team so much as well.
I think another thing that happens with Brene Brown, the way that I understand it, is her questions come about from the conversations. She doesn't
Yes.
she doesn't have her big strong hypothesis initially. She talks to the patients or to the people first to say, what is the truth here? Do you
Yes.
use that model as well?
She's a grounded theory. Yes. So she's a grounded theory researcher. And I do have a lot of grounded theory. I do use some grounded theory work to allow things to bubble up from the data, right? So you talk to people and then you look at their stories and figure out what's in there. So that is one thing that we do, but we also do mixed methods as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get the quantitative surveys and biometrics if we're looking at blood pressures or something like that. And then we also use the stories and see how these things work together. So as you said, you might see something in that data that you're working with around the individual who is labeled as an alcoholic, and then you find out later that he's, been sober for over 20 years. And then what does that mean? And figure out what that story actually helps us understand. So we try to put both of those kinds of data together to really see how those things make sense of each other. Because I don't think you can go with just one. You have to have both. And in the projects that we're working on right now, we were actually just working on one of our qualitative code books today with my team, we're interviewing providers of substance use treatment is what we're currently working on. We're working on recruiting for bringing in different types of providers who treat individuals with substance misuse, and trying to figure out ways to improve treatment through talking to them. So we're going to see what they say, and we're also going to be talking with patients and bringing those things together, and then that will help us do a survey. So we try to bring all of those pieces together.
Then they become one of the subject matter experts, in a sense.
Exactly.
I want to probe something else, and I'll start with a confession. Even as for myself, with an epidemiology background, study design, training, biostatistics, I get bogged down in scientific papers. If I don't understand the abstract, I generally won't even try to read the full paper. If that happens to me, I can only imagine what it's like for someone who didn't have that background. They see a methods section and they just stop. And when we publish, there's a requirement to be scientific, but if we're losing the people that we're addressing, whether it be nurses or whether it be patients, clients, whatever, how do you work at fixing that communication gap?
That is a really good question. And I think it comes down to a lot of different pieces as well. And I will tell you, when I first started grad school, so the other part of my history is my first two degrees, my bachelor's and my master's, are in theater. So then changing over and going into public health for my doctorate, I remember saying over and over again, I feel like I'm learning a whole new language on top of trying to do my doctoral studies. I felt like I didn't even know the language of what I was trying to learn. And that is really intimidating. And I thought I sort of knew what I was doing, at least to some extent, because, I'd read a lot of research. No, I was pretty clueless around so many different things. And usually if I am reading an abstract and it is that bad and I have no idea what they're talking about, to me, that's a really bad paper. I mean, just to start with. And if it's that bad and I'm not getting it in the abstract, I'm not going to necessarily bother reading it. So you want to find the ones that are more approachable, for one thing. And when I teach this. So I also teach how to apply evidence to practice to medical students. So I am a professor at a medical school. And through that, I teach how to apply research to practice and how do you do that? And what are all the steps that you should be going through when you're thinking about how to treat a patient with a certain condition. And one of those pieces is learning to understand some of what's in the methods section. And to me, you can't necessarily know exactly what every single statistical test if you're not a biostatistician, right? But you're reading, okay, they're going to do 2 t-tests instead of an ANOVA. I might even have to go look up, okay, why would an ANOVA be better than a t-test? And if I'm thinking about it, but the average practitioner probably is like, okay, the way when I talk to patients, we call it fancy space math. So when people are doing the fancy space math, you can look at that and you might not know whether it's fully the correct statistical tests that should be going on. But to me, that's not the only important thing in the methods. So much important things in the methods, especially if it's a massage intervention. There's so many other things that I would want practitioners to think about before, other than the stats. I want them to think about whether the question is meaningful for them as a practitioner that's even being asked. Or again, is there a massage therapist on the team who's written this? And if there's not, it's not that it's going to be a bad paper. I'm not saying that, but take that into account. I mean, was there a massage? Who was delivering the massage? Was it volunteers? Was it massage therapists? Was it nurses? Was it OTs or PTs or a chiropractor or somebody with a DO? Because all of these people have massage within their scope. And it doesn't mean that you're going to throw out the research if it was done by nurses, but you want to think about that. Is that going to really help me understand how to treat a patient? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. It's just trying to, as you started this, remaining curious and thinking about, so how can I really use this information? Because there is so much research that is coming out every single day. And I don't even remember what the latest stats are, but there's no way that you could keep up with all the research, especially now with AI, which I don't think we really need to go down that track, but that even more papers are coming out and even faster. And there is just this evidence piling up. So it's trying to find the right piece of evidence or the right pieces of evidence to help you figure out what you're wanting to do. And so that can take some learning on how to go and find the things that you really need to help you think about how to treat a specific patient. I don't know if that fully answered your question or not.
No, that's good. Trying to think of a segue into something else. Maybe I'll just segue and say I'm segueing into something else. Couple
Or
of
as I
years
say in
ago,
my house, abruptly changing topics. What we say in our house is abruptly changing topics.
Okay. So a few years ago, I met Troy Leving. He was teaching at AMTA in New Hampshire. And I'm going to paraphrase something that he said during that class. He said, whatever technique you use is okay, is good. That the important piece is what really matters and what makes a difference is the connection with the patient. I think that's reflected in the work that you do as well. We all like, well, I shouldn't say we all like. A lot of people feel that their way is the way to treat a patient, but the connection is important as well. And I see that with what you're talking about in research. Do you agree with that statement of his, or?
100%. Because to me, it's the communication and the connection. Because if you are communicating and connecting with your patient or your client, then, and you're providing them with helping them reach their goals in whatever they are for their treatment with you. It's that upfront communication, which I don't think we're trained on very well as massage therapists. in learning how to do those conversations, maybe around shared decision making, helping the patients figure out what their specific goals are for treatment, or if they even have any, or if they just want to feel a little better. And you have to be able to connect and have that communication with them to help move their treatment forward through their goals. And it can't be about my goal as a practitioner just wanting somebody to get better, when that is part of it, but it really should be more about that connection. But that's for any relationship. So just a little tidbit, since again, I teach medical students, the things that come for lawsuits more than anything else against around malpractice for doctors is bad communication. So if that's what drives lawsuits in the medical world, then learning how to communicate well with your patients in whatever field you're in should be some of the foremost work that we do and are taught, in my opinion.
And do you feel we're totally missing the mark on that one in our education?
I don't know if we're missing the mark, but if we ever get to expand our education for more than, what's the average now nationally, 650 hours or something? If we ever get beyond that, or if maybe there should be more continuing ed courses about communication and how to have those conversations with patients. And I can't say that we're all doing it badly or that every school doesn't do this well, because I don't know. But that was kind of how I felt coming out of school 27 years ago. So they may have gotten better. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I have been a therapist I got my degree in 1999, got my license in 99.
Have you stopped practicing altogether?
Yeah, I don't have time. I wish I could. I still work. So my daughter is about to start her sophomore year in college, and she's a cheerleader. And so I have to work competitive cheer. And so every now and then I'll work on some of her teammates a little bit. Every now and then she tries to get me to work on the football players. And like, no, they can see the trainers.
And
but,
Thor.
But I still will work on her whenever she needs it. We'll work on other family members if a friend, but no, I don't have a practice anymore. There is no way I could do that.
Doesn't work.
No.
What has been some successes for you in communicating with the front lines? Do you have any stories?
Define front lines for me.
Well, either
Define
the nurses
you
mentioned nurses, you mentioned massage therapists, patients as well. So communicating the hard data to those types of people.
Sure. So I think one of the most meaningful meetings that we had in the patient engagement studio, this was in that first year. So this was back in 2016. And I remember this is when I really changed as a researcher. We had a set of researchers coming to our panel of patients to get feedback on their study, which was looking at cognitive decline in individuals who were going through treatment for multiple myeloma, so a type of cancer. And they came to our patients and were asking them about how they were planning on going about doing this study design and what they were thinking of. And people were going to be going through testing for I want to say it might have been 12 weeks that they would take some surveys or to see if people were declining cognitively over 3 to 6 months. I don't remember exactly what the time was. And one of our patients, patient experts, whom I can just see the meeting in my head, and she looked at the researchers. Her name is Pam, and she said, "So are you going to tell them how they did?" This was for the participants in the study. "You're going to tell them how they did." And the researcher just looked at her and said, "No, because this is a measurement study. We're just looking to see if this actually happens. And we're looking to see how, if people actually decline." And Pam looked at the researcher again and said, are you going to tell them how they did? And this went back and forth a couple of times. And Pam then stopped and she said, okay, did the people have cognitive decline? Are you going to tell them if they declined, mentally? Are you going to let them know? And the researcher just stopped and was like, oh, do you think patients would want to know that? And it was just that fundamental piece of, as a researcher, I was not trained in how to do that second piece of to actually then give that feedback. Okay, you took all these tests with us, you did this many times, and this is how you improved or didn't. That wasn't necessarily part of what I was taught, and when I've met with other researchers, what they were taught either. And that was just such a fundamental change for me to also see the learning of the researcher get it as well. And to have that dual learning experience between us. And it was just incredibly powerful. And so there are things like that that come up. And there's just that fascination of when a patient will say something that seems pretty just logical. And as the scientists were like, oh, yeah, that's kind of makes sense. And the other one that I think of when people ask me like, well, how do you know that this is actually changing studies or anything like that? On a completely different study, this was in about 2022, a researcher came to us and was trying to look at the prevalence, like how many people were getting COVID in the state of South Carolina. And they were going to be sending out invitations to join the study to, I think, 30,000 people in the state. And then they were going to do press conferences about this. And one of the main things this researcher wanted to know was, how do I get people not to throw out the invitation? Because it's going to come in the mail. What do I do? I'm really worried they're going to think it's junk mail and just toss it. And I think it was Pam again. Pam's brilliant. She looked at the researcher and said, oh, you make sure that the envelope is colored like a blue envelope. And then every time you go do press about it, you say, look for the blue envelope. That will be your invitation. I mean, super simple. And then shortly after that, on their website for this research study, it says big and bold on the front page, look for the blue envelope. And then they have a picture of it. So for me, that was very, very clear, showing how something so simple could potentially change research moving forward. As a suggestion, just for us, it was an average South Carolinian on how to improve that research. So those are the types of things that really make me just so excited. And those are not massage research. With massage research, there's just a lot of fun. There's my Project Cope study, we have 2 papers for that under review right now. So that one was great too. So that was during the pandemic as well. And you're back. Adidas is back.
Good. For a massage.
Yes. So massage therapists were included in Project Cope. This was this wild project that in March of 2020, I was coming back in town. The world was getting ready to shut down. And when it was starting to shut down, one of my best friends, he was an RN and he was working on his dissertation. He was working on his doctorate at the time. And we were both concerned. So he was an RN and he was worried about the nurses who were going to be locked into the system. And I was worried about massage therapists in practice and what's going to happen. And in 3 weeks, we got together a team of, I want to say, about 12 other scientists, decided on our measures, and launched a longitudinal study to enroll any healthcare provider or healthcare provider student or healthcare student to follow them throughout this, really the beginning stages of the pandemic, even though we know it started back in probably November, December 2019. And this was right in mid-April we launched this, and people filled out surveys and they could put in video blogs as well based on some questions. So it was mixed methods. And we got over 500 massage therapists join that study. And I think it really helped some people process what they were going through at the time, because massage therapy, we couldn't work, right? I mean, I know I didn't have a practice, but massage therapists couldn't work. And it also came down to the way people were talking about the profession and how upsetting that could be. And then you have this other group that are locked into this healthcare system and they can't get out. And then what do? And how do they process their feelings? And are they being hypervigilant? And how can we as professions think about things in the future if something like this comes up? And what can we as massage therapists do? My thought at one point was, once the vaccines came out and massage therapists in a lot of places still weren't working, why don't we train them how to give vaccines? We know how to palpate a deltoid. We could give vaccinations when you needed that many people. It didn't happen. It was just an idea. But I thought it could make sense. But that was me.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the projects that have been really meaningful.
I'm trying to think back to something you said at the beginning, which was you didn't feel that you accomplished what you thought you would as a researcher. And what are your goals? Have you readjusted your goals, or are you going to hit those goals? Are you changing?
So I do think I have. Yeah, with what I had said was I didn't completely fix massage therapy research, because there are still massage therapy research papers that come out. That there was one a year or two ago, and there was no massage therapist included. It was more of I don't remember if it was a systematic review or something, but even the definitions, like what they were talking about, weren't right. They kept calling it alternative medicine. They used the terms alternative medicine in this paper as well. And for me, with that one, is in many ways, I mean, the NIH changed the title of their institute around integrative medicine back in 2014. Why am I still seeing papers coming out in different fields talking about alternative medicine, complementary and alternative medicine, instead of complementary and integrative health, or complementary and integrative medicine? That was 2014. We are well past 10 years since that change was made at the NIH. And so there are things around that frustrate me. I really hope that with massage therapy that we are continuing to see some of these very interesting things come out, and how can we really help different populations moving forward. I don't do a lot of massage intervention work. Sometimes I'll be included on teams that do, but I'm really always very interested in the massage therapists and how they practice and what does that look like. So my massage research is more in that realm, more or less just kind of around the profession. So I do still do work in that area, and I do get invited to be on research teams as a massage therapist and stakeholder to talk about how things are in practice. And if I am too far out of practice, I try to make sure that I recognize that, because I have been out of practice for a while. But I try to stay truly engaged with the profession as well. I truly consider myself a massage therapist who teaches at a medical school, which is hysterical to me in many ways.
Do you, before we go to audience questions, we're going to do that right away, but one final question that just popped into my head is, do you feel like you miss the practice, the hands-on work?
So I would say that with every job, I'm on my third career now, right? So in every single job, you have positives and negatives. And to me, so much of any wonderful piece of any job, the positive piece, is about connection. So I missed that connection with my clients and my patients that I had for years, right? That is a wonderful piece that I had, and I miss helping people get out of pain. But how can I elevate that now? And now I think of much of my work is trying to help our future physicians in this country. Now I might only get 100 of them a year at my medical school. But how can I get them to also think about and respect this profession, knowing that their patients might not want to talk to them about some of the things that they do to help them feel better because they think their physician might not respect their choice of going and utilizing massage therapy for their health. So how can I change the hearts and minds as um, one of my coordinators for one of my projects says, yep, all hearts and minds are clear. So if I can help change some of that perspective with different colleagues, with my students to understand that massage therapy is truly a good part of a healthcare routine, then I think I will have done something okay and probably pretty good for our profession. But for me, that I want to help provide a space for that to happen. No, it can't only be me. It has to be others.
Mhm.
And how can we bring more of us in and show that massage therapy truly is a part of how to be a good and healthy human? And
Mhm.
how can we do that treatment well?
It reminds me of an encounter I had with um, orthopedic doc at one point, and I was asking him about massage for hip pain, and he said, "If you want to waste your money, then by all means do it." I thought, okay, thanks.
Yep.
Uh,
I basically got that exact same thing from an editor at Mayo Clinic when Mayo Clinic Proceedings tried to, sorry, calling it out by name. Probably shouldn't have done that. Um, but I remember submitting a massage paper to them and they're like, eh.
yeah.
And they're like, no, we're not going to do anything with massage in this journal. Okay.
So I'm opening up for the audience if anyone wants to ask Ann a question.
No.
Oh, I have so many questions. I don't even know how to
Okay.
formulate them into a cohesive thought. I suppose first and foremost, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom. I can relate to so many things that you've shared, especially the part about, having to learn a new language, changing careers and finding mentorship and finding that motivation to keep going and that your cause is worth pursuing. But I had to take so many notes. Like I have to look at my notes to formulate my questions. So the things that really stuck out to me, so I'll try to wrap this into an actual question, was that, you can't keep up with the research. So I feel like this is like everything is always changing. As soon as you think you know the right thing to do or the correct way to do a thing, somebody comes along with some new tidbit of research and says, oh no, that's not how you do it. And so that evidence and research overload is very real, I think, in every single aspect of our life, whether it's diet or exercise or health or how to when to put gas in your car. It's crazy. And so I piggyback on that statement with your comment about the number one cause for lawsuits in the medical field is communication. And I'm like, well, gosh, I was thinking, isn't that the number one problem with everything? Like you can have a problem with your car and then to get into a discussion with your mechanic and they didn't relay the right thing. Like, so communication is huge in
Yes.
this whole entire conversation. And so like what I've tried to formulate my question is based on that communication, communicating with your patient experts and physicians and then all of the other professionals you work with, like what evidence at this point do you actually, you maybe this is just you personally, are you actually looking for that you can say, hey, this is effective? Because if the data and the evidence is changing so quickly, when do you feel like this is solid? Like this is affirming. This is a good little nugget. Does that
Yeah.
even make sense in all of
Yes.
that
Oh,
rambling?
it absolutely does. It does, because the end of almost every research paper, right? It says something like, "This is great, and we found good things, and we still have to do more research." Right? That's at the end of
Right.
almost every paper,
It's
right?
never ending. But I guess maybe to keep it at the touch point tone, which is what this call is all about. Maybe it's for you. What little nugget makes you go, this is real. This is
Well, I
tangible.
think right. So I think we do have evidence that massage therapy helps with anxiety, depression, and sleep and pain, right? Generally,
Right.
right? Whether it's kind of those, I can say pretty solidly, because it is across multiple different conditions. It's even in there's some clinical guidelines around breast cancer and lung cancer, I believe, that specifically have massage therapy as the suggested intervention. I think it was with lung cancer if the patient has, maybe I think that one was around depression in particular. And this was a clinical guideline. And the breast cancer one might have been about anxiety and pain. I can't remember, but they were specifically recommending massage therapy for these things. So a clinical guideline for a physician, if there's something like that, I'm pretty solid that we probably have pretty good evidence for that.
Right.
Um, and but we can never say that we. So my dad is also a scientist, and he would yell at me if I ever said the word prove around science. We don't prove anything. We get evidence. Okay, Dad. It was his thing.
I love it.
Don't say prove. It's not what we do,
Right.
because there's always going to be a new way to test something.
Right.
And there's going to be new thinking about how to do something in a different way. Like something just recently that came out was, oh, geez, what was it? It was about a third circulatory system that might explain. So we have lymphatic circulation, we have blood circulation, and I want to say this is like the interstitial.
That's it.
And there was and there was a whole thing in the New York Times Magazine about this. And there's a potential that this whole circulatory system might align with the meridians for acupuncture.
It's all connected.
And it's
Right.
like, wow. And that just blew my mind. And then there was this other study that just came out, and I actually got to talk to the researchers. And hold on, I have to pull up the exact sort of title on it. Humans have the ability to detect objects without touching them.
Right. But
And I
this
was
is,
like,
again,
oh,
this is the communication. Like this is the
right.
nonverbal, it's the nonverbal communication. And in the case of a really good massage therapist, it's the listening without talking. Because you're
Well,
not
what
getting
this
that from
was,
a physician, right?
well,
Sometimes if they have time for you.
depending. And yes, they have a very truncated, I don't want to bash on them, because that's what I teach them,
Yeah.
I teach them some communication. So hopefully I help them with that a little bit and with
Right.
the connection with their patient. But what this whole thing was about was people could detect a block under sand without actually having to touch the block. And when a friend, Melissa Martini, sent me this article, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what we do in practice all the time. Of course, we're feeling things
Right.
that we don't necessarily know. I mean, I remember in practice, someone would say, how did you know that hurt? I'm like, I have no idea. My hands are smarter than my brain. They just
Right.
know where to go. But there has to be something that we're doing in this thing. So I got to talk to those researchers, and I said, and they were like, I think one was a psychologist and the other one was a mechanical engineer. They weren't thinking about health at all. They were trying to test robots,
Right.
but the people did better than the robots. So I was like, you guys need to have massage therapists as part of your team, because we do this all day long. And you could test them against people who've never been trained before and see if massage therapists actually can feel things that are different. So I got very excited about that.
That's
And
cool.
yes, it is so much about the communication and how we talk about what we can find and what we know. And so you have to keep doing the studies over and over again to see if you find anything new or if you're still finding the same thing. Like, do I really need to see another paper on massage for low back pain? Maybe if you're trying something really different, but I think that one's kind of, it's not going to help all back pain, but it's something to try, right?
Right.
I think we have that evidence. But how to actually then do that for your patients, that's the hard part. How do we then think about, okay, if I know it can help with anxiety, depression, sleep, and pain, are there different ways to do that treatment, and which treatment is most effective? Is it myofascial release? Is it Swedish? Is it neuromuscular therapy? Which one is most effective? And how much of the patient's preference needs to be included in that? Because if you have somebody who can't handle really deep work, then neuromuscular therapy is not going to be maybe as effective for them because they'd be guarding the whole time, right? Versus maybe let's try manual lymphatic drainage. And maybe that's what's causing some of these issues. So we know in general, but the specifics I think are still being worked out to some degree. I don't know if that, you got me excited.
No, I love your enthusiasm. So keep doing, because it's so important, and I'm just so grateful that you've done a 180 and taken on a whole new career path to make this your passion. So it's important.
Thank you.
So thank you, Rebecca. And thank you. I'm going to, one more question before I let you go, Anne, is what parting tidbit would you like to leave with everyone here after this conversation? I know we could go on for another hour. I'm sure we could, but it's time. So what would you like to tell the audience tonight?
So one of the things I was thinking about when I was prepping for this was, research is important, but it's only important if it can be applied to practice. And how would researchers know what questions are interesting to massage therapists and their clientele and their patients? So there has to be a joining of the two. You've got to have the practitioners and you have to have the researchers. So the more that we can bring those two together, because so many of the really interesting research questions for me come from practice. And we have, we have research-based practice, but we should also have practice-based research. And we have some networks that can lead to that. But remain curious as a massage therapist and just always ask those questions of, what is it that could really help this client at this moment in time? How can I best help them reach their goals? And what is the evidence that can help get me there to help this patient be as healthy as they can be and reach those goals? And just continue to ask those questions. But also then you can also think about gathering data and write case reports, because so many good research questions come from case reports because of something interesting you saw in practice, where you're in practice like, that's weird. That's weird is so much more interesting to me than Eureka. So those are the types of things that I really think about. It's like, what were the things? Why did I have this one client who the deep work never worked with that one, even though they were in so much pain? But craniosacral therapy did. Why? How do we wrap our heads around that and just stay curious and keep moving it forward and help as many people as we can? I guess would be what I would finalize it with.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for helping us understand a little bit of what you do and what we could do to improve, not just in massage therapy, but just life in general. Stay curious. I think that's the key that I like to do with this. I think that the touch point is like having a conversation with a stranger, maybe not a stranger, maybe somewhat a stranger, and asking things that provoke interesting conversation. And I think we got that tonight. I thank you so much for accepting to be on tonight. And I also thank you for being able to change time, because you were going to come in September and we had someone else who had to back out of August. He's coming in September instead. Thank you all for being
Well,
in
I'm
the
glad
room
I was
tonight.
available.
Good. Our next call is Tuesday, September 2nd at 7 again. It actually may be September 9th, but I'm in a conversation with Whitney Lowe, who's going to be our next guest. And we'll see where that goes. I don't know what rabbit holes we'll jump down, but it'll be interesting. Now, if tonight moved you, subscribe to your touchpoint.com, and this recording will be up in a couple of days. And yeah, Rebecca, I think you had a question for Steve. Did you have a question, Steve?
I have a question after Rebecca asked me if I had. So thank you very much, Ann. And I'll make this really quick. I had a couple of comments, but I'm just going to ask the question. So you talked about alternative medicines, that some treatments were classified as that. So I get my massage therapy through the VA. And I've noticed that on the VA, I could have chiropractic, I could have acupuncture, massage, and a couple of others. Is that something, probably Vincent would know this, is that something new that they've offered? I mean, was that not something I could have gotten in the past?
So I wouldn't necessarily know exactly how the VA has been doing it, but they have adopted the whole person health model. And they have been some of the ones who have integrated more of this type of care quicker than other groups. So when the VA brings it in, they're really trying to help move healthcare forward as well. So they did bring in acupuncture and massage therapy quicker than most health systems, is my understanding. So I don't know how long it's been, but they've been some of the first who have done it, because they are trying to look at the entire person in all aspects of it. So it's not just if you come in with low back pain, kind of how we do our work, right? I'm thinking of, if somebody comes in with low back pain, I'm thinking of the shoes they're wearing. I'm thinking of the position that they sleep in. I think of what they're doing all day at work. I'm thinking about the amount of exercise that they're doing. All of those different pieces. Do they have social support? Do they have people at home that can help them, either emotionally, financially, in all sorts of ways? So that's what, when we talk about whole person health, we're talking about all of that. It is not just one piece of the body, right? It's trying to really think about the emotional, spiritual, and physical pieces of individuals. And they've moved it even broader than the biopsychosocial model. It's really moving into whole person health. And so that has been fascinating to watch. And I think, now I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's fully true, but I heard that Eddie Phillips is the one who kind of moved that forward. And he's a MD out of Harvard, I believe. So the VA started that. Now the NIH, at the NCCIH, so the National Centers for Complementary and Integrative Health, they have a whole person health model. And that's actually what I teach at my medical school, is thinking whole person health and how does that all come together.
Thank you very much.
So,
I get really good care from the VA, so I'm very grateful.
That is excellent to hear.
And to just answer the time frame, I know that it's been at least 8 years. That's when I
Yeah,
started working with the VA.
it's been a good long while. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, again, thank you so much, Ann, for being here tonight. We're out of time, but look forward to seeing everyone again next month. And thank you all for being here. And the show will be